Hey guys, it's Mystery here, and today the video is all about balance. Balance has been a recent topic of discussion amongst lots of YouTubers. Well, when I say lots of YouTubers, Reginald and I, pretty much, in terms of Darktide YouTubers. We have sort of each released videos on the issue of balance within Darktide. Myself just kind of giving more the perspectives of the community and the higher end players and Fat Shark themselves, and then Reginald getting, as Reginald is wont to do, getting much more technical and specific. And in fact, in his latest video, which I'll link in the description, he gives very well thought out and mechanical sort of pointers to which are the overperforming things that are causing the game's balance to get out of whack, especially at the higher levels of play. So today's video is going to be a synthesis of both kind of responding to that and all of the myriad comments that I received on my last video talking about balance. There was almost 600 comments, and I saw a couple of them that I really felt. So I will just be stealing those, and those are my opinion now, more or less. But what I'm here to say is that I think I have kind of nailed down where I sit in this issue, and so I'll be talking about that and trying to justify that today. And hopefully there's some people on both sides of the fence that I can sway to my opinion, because I think that it won't be all doom and gloom as many Darktide players are always predicting for the game. Before I get into any of that though, I want to take a quick detour here and just thank you, viewer, for watching. All of the views and the comments and the likes, and especially the subscriptions and the memberships, all those things have kept the channel going and growing, and we are over 20,000 subscribers now, which is literally something I thought was impossible. 6 months plus ago, I didn't think that you could even get 20,000 subscribers on a Darktide only channel, but yet here we are. And I really want to thank you as the viewers, because you are the ones who have kept me in this fight by showing me that there is a hunger out there for quality builds and discussion about the game and just generally like having a fun time. Thank you so much for sticking it out with me. And I also want to thank Fat Shark for, having that pseudo partnership with me, but mostly because through the wishlisting thing I was doing during the RBD's launch, they gave me 20 keys to the RBD's, and so I was able to give those keys out plus 20 more that I purchased with my own money. So we gave out 40, I think it was like 42 keys to members of the community. Pretty much everybody who submitted a fanfic or submitted art got a key to the RBD's, and that was so awesome to be able to do that for you guys. Here are also, by the way, some artists. I thought that these did not get enough eyes on them, so these are some of the art submissions. Actually, this is all of the art submissions that we got, but I definitely want to be doing these contests in the future for more Darktide content, because I thought that was so fun and such a great way to give back to the community. So thank you guys so much, and that's enough patting ourselves in the back. Let's talk about balance. Let's solve this shit once and for all, shall we? Alright guys, let's turn it over to some graphical representation to better explain the problem at hand before I attempt to give you how I feel in this issue and potentially the path I think that Darktide Fat Shark should be taking moving forward. So as you can see here, we have some colors. The horizontal axes, or whatever this is, these horizontal lines, these represent the appropriate difficulties that you can accomplish with various weapons. So for Shredder auto pistols, you can reasonably complete anything that is a normal game, meaning anything like Auric and below is perfectly fine with the Shredder auto pistol. You won't run into any issues. But if you try to move up here into this bracket between the Auric difficulty and the Havoc 40 difficulty, meaning you're playing the Havoc game mode, the Shredder is no longer appropriate. It's probably more appropriate to bring something like the Infantry Auto Gun, a very similar sort of weapon to the Shredder, that can perform better in Havocs. But as you approach higher Havocs, even the Infantry Auto Gun is going to start to fall off, and that's where a more appropriate weapon altogether would be the Plasma Gun. The Plasma Gun is a very solid weapon. It's appropriate against all threats that can appear on Havoc 40, all sorts of armor, shields, walls, all that sort of stuff. It cuts through. So you don't have to worry about having a weapon that's not up to the task with the Plasma Gun. And then we have the Rumbler. The Rumbler is not appropriately powerful for anything in the game. In fact, it is game-breaking level of powerful. It is made for a game that fundamentally doesn't have the same rules as Darktide, more or less. It nullifies the challenge of large groups of enemies by having massive AoE. It has a huge fuck ton of damage, and it has stagger, knocks everything to the ground, right? So the Rumbler is an outlier here, is what we'd like to say. The Rumbler cannot reasonably be balanced around. And here is the crux of the argument, right? We need to balance these options. And you might be saying, well, just make everything go up here, right? Just make everything come up here. Okay, that's the only buff strategy that I see a ton of players saying. It's a PvE game, just make everything powerful, duh. Okay, first of all, the first question arises, how in the fuck would you make the Shredder auto pistol as powerful as a grenade launcher that has a 15-meter radius? There's literally no way, unless these bullets start instant killing crushers, right? There's just no feasible way the Shredder would ever be able to approach that power. They cannot have any parity between them. The second problem here is that now all of these weapons are just so obscenely good, it's going to skew the overall challenge of the game if every weapon is as powerful as the Rumbler, and so the game is going to be broken by the overall power distribution. So that's the only buff strategy that I've been seeing a ton of people post, and we cannot do that because this again would be absolutely absurd. Now what you could do is you could balance to somewhere in the middle, right? We could bring the plasma down a little bit, we could bring the Shredder up a lot, and we could bring the infantry autogun up a lot and meet somewhere like right here. The problem with that is that people are already crying about the plasma gun and getting nerfed. Imagine how much they're going to cry when the Rumbler has to be moved down that much, right? So, yeah, huge nerfs will have to come if you're going to try to meet these weapons somewhere in the middle. And this here is the inherent crux of the whole issue. The power rankings, the disparities between power are so vast right now that any changes to make them meet somewhere in the middle is going to be a massive nerf or a massive buff. What I contend is that some things, some very, very high outlier things, like the Rumbler, should be moved down a little bit. Honestly, personally, the plasma could be left alone, and then other things should be moved up a lot a bit. And this is where I want to get to the second argument that is being made. And this argument is more in line with what Reginald is saying, because Reginald is this player type right here. He is a top 1% players, less than 1% of players. He is a very, very skilled player, invests thousands of hours in this game, and I know that there is a cohort of players just like him that exist that, I see their content, I see them playing the game every single day, streaming the game, they are in it to win it, and they are so much better than I am at this game. It makes me look like a clown. They always complete Havoc 40s. They can complete Havoc 40s with 3 men, 2 men, 1 man, and very suboptimal weapons in my approximation. So this group of players right here is also an outlier in our arrangement of players, and they are also going to present an issue for game balance, as we'll see in just a second. Here's me. I can complete Havoc 40s. As you see, I'm right in this line. I complete Havoc 40s with some regularity, and that's probably about 50% of the time. And the better a build I use and the stronger character I use, if I use RBD's Ogre and Zealot, I'm doing good. I probably complete about 60-70% of games. If I play as Psyker, 10%, maybe 5% of my games are victories, unless I have a really, really solid team around me. So I am playing at that Havoc 40 line, but I consider myself a hardcore casual, right? I'm probably in the top 1% of players. I'd have to assume that players that can complete Havoc 40 are 1%ers, but I'm not in that upper echelon of players. So what about the players below me? We have the average Havoc enjoyers down here. These are the players who are probably at Havoc 25-ish. They might not ever make it to Havoc 40, but that's their goal, right? They're sort of moving on up. And when the buffs of the weapons happen and buffs to the characters happen, they do get to move up a little bit more. And then the final group is what I would consider beginners and casuals. These players are living somewhere between Oryx and normals. They might not have interest in playing anything higher than the stuff on the main mission board. They probably won't ever touch Havoc because it's just a different beast entirely. But they're working their way up, and this is where they're existing for now. So here is the fundamental problem. Remember back on this page, what I said that the solution is that the upper echelons of power need to be brought down a little bit, but that most things need to go up a lot. And that will cause a problem over here too. This is what players would claim, right? If we boost the overall power a lot, and specifically this is where I want to talk about class balance. If the remaining 3 classes, Zealot, Veteran, and Psyker, all get buffed to be as strong and well-rounded as the Ogren and the Arbites, it will do this to the power distribution in the game. So beginners and casuals, now that they have 5 classes to choose from that are all very safe or have lots of very powerful abilities and solid weapons, they will begin to be able to clear Oryx a lot more regularly, and they'll probably maybe even take that challenge to the next level and try to get into Havocs. Your average Havoc enjoyer is going to skew much closer to being able to complete Havoc 40 with a lot of regularity. I myself will be able to play Psyker and actually win games, and my Ogren won't get any better just because they're buffing other classes, but in general my play will be on a higher level because there will be more options for different weapons that I can use and perform at a better level. And then this group, as I said before, is going to have an issue because now they are up here above this red bar, and up here is where the game gets patently absurd. This is where the game is going to have to spawn, 5 bosses at a time, and the twins, and the whole enemy horde is going to be turned into crushers, and there's twice as many crushers as there ever were before, and they all have purple buffs on them, and they move twice as fast. Like, that's the sort of thing that would have to be happening up here in order for these players to continue being challenged. And at that point, as I wrote over here, the game fundamentally breaks down. The game won't function like Darktide anymore. This is a criticism players have had for a long time. Reginald mentions it in his video. No one is really happy with the way that the game has turned into just shoving 50 fucking million shotgunners and gunners, and every fucking box has like 3 dudes crouched behind it. Players, I think, want a more like parsable experience where there's not literally 85 enemies in any given arena. They want 30 enemies in an arena and just make them more challenging, right? So this is going to be a problem because these players are now living in a realm where if they want to keep the game engaging and challenging for these players, if they say introduce like Havoc 60 or whatever, what's Havoc 60 going to be if Havoc 40 is what it is? It's going to be an absolute clusterfuck nightmare. It won't even resemble Darktide anymore. They'll be playing an entirely different game, like a fucking MMO with just giant fucking hordes where you have to AoE nuke them down. So that is the argument that these players are making, and Reginald is making, is that if you buff everything, then everybody skews upwards, and even these players up here who oftentimes choose like less optimal builds and less optimal weapons, well, what happens when all of the less optimal weapons are turned into optimal weapons, or more and more of them are, right? Eventually, they're just going to get bored with the game. It's not going to be challenging enough, and if it is tried to be made challenging enough, it's going to just be absurd. Okay, so that's the argument laid out, and I have thought about this a lot, and I wanted to just kind of weigh in and give my opinion on this. And here is where I have to bring up a comment from one of my channel members who I am going to just steal their opinion like 95%. As Lead Belcher Paint Pot says in their wise words, as someone who isn't streamer level, but must play Havoc 30 to 40 for actual difficulty, I don't think player win rate is too high. Plenty of wipes even with the dueling sword and rumblers. Since I started playing, however, skill expression has definitely become less important. I remember as a newer player seeing people dance around like 4 crushers for a minute or two because there wasn't anything in the game that could actually smite crushers to oblivion. Is it the most important? I don't really know. I'm not a game dev or psychologist who knows how to most efficiently engage people. In my non-expert opinion, buff the other classes, and then perhaps we take a proper look at reducing player power across the board or increasing enemy strength across the board, etc., etc. So this absolutely perfectly encapsulates how I feel about the issue. Me, remember, I'm right here, right? I am a Havoc 40 accomplisher. I've got True Survivor, flexing my big muscles, right? But I am not going to be thrown into the completing 100% of all Havoc games by any potential buffs. First of all, when buffs do come to Zealot and Veteran and Psyker, well, 2 of those classes I suck at and I don't generally play. If you have noticed, I play pretty much constantly on the other classes, on the classes that are already better. And I do not shy away from using the meta weapons. All of my builds use meta weapons. I am using the strongest possible stuff and playing on my best classes, and I'm right here. Right, I could be better if I invested more time, but here's where I am. And if they do buff other stuff, if they buff the classes I don't play, it won't really move me much. It might move me up a little bit. Why did I draw that arrow? It might move me up a little bit, but not too much, right? Remember, you can only play one class at a time. So if the whole roster of classes gets more powerful, it's not helping players that already play on Ogryn. They've already got the buffs they're going to get. The argument could be made that the overall, skill, player base matters because you have 4 players on a team, and if now you have 4 players who are all as powerful as Ogryn, you'll roll over games. But I think that that's where we get to the second discussion, which is, as Leadbelcher says, there has been a loss of skill expression in the game, right? There's now the Ogryn, who can just club enemies repeatedly until they're staggered and they don't even get to counterplay this, get beat to death. There's the dueling sword, of course, which is probably going to receive a nerf, which can instantly stab, bonus stab, and then stab again and kill a crusher before it even gets to act. There's Rumbler. There's tons of weapons that are kind of anti-fun and don't really allow the enemies to engage. Well, I think this is where the game still has untapped potential, because this is the threat, right? As we addressed previously, if we move the player power up a lot, there will be this small but important cohort of players who invest a lot of time in this game that will now have to engage with the game, assuming that like Havoc 40 to 60 is added, they'll have to engage with this game that fundamentally is broken, that fundamentally is not the same game at all. It's spawning twice as many enemies, they're all rabid, there's you'll have 3 modifiers instead of 2 in those Havoc difficulties. It'll just be a fucking mess. But what I think is that there is an untapped potential for Darktide and for Fat Shark to change the way the game systems work. I think that what we need is more complex enemies. I think that the combat puzzle is reaching the upper limits of how complex it can be by just adding more pieces. I think that each of those pieces needs to be more difficult to solve. And by that, I mean we need to have more specialist enemies who make you think and engage, and not just spawn more of the same specialist enemies. What's 5 mutants versus 2? Maybe there should be a type of enemy who is stealthed and can creep up on you and disable you if you don't shoot them when they're trying to stealth in or something like that. Maybe, and this is an idea I've had for a long time, captains, when you're on Havoc 40 and above, have a suppression field that prevents the usage of ultimate abilities, and therefore that would curb a lot of the ultimate spam that defines winning fights on higher levels. So that would, in one fell swoop, not only make the encounter much more difficult on one front, but it would also reduce a problem with players' exponential scaling when you're using stacking very, very powerful abilities. So these are ideas. These are just a couple of shitty ideas that I threw together in 2 seconds that could ostensibly increase the difficulty of the game and make that complex combat puzzle more complex without making it fundamentally game breaking, without making it just annoying with how many enemies are on screen and stuff. And I would love if, that was the goal of Fat Shark. I have to believe somewhere deep down in my heart that that is the thing that we are steering towards, because if we looked at the bent of history in recent times, we've seen a buff to Ogryn's power. We've seen a introduction of the Arbites, who is very powerful, right? And we have to imagine that Veteran is probably up next, or maybe Zealot, and then Psyker, and those characters are going to get power buffs as well. Well, this has to be preparing us for something. They do realize, they know that player power is getting bigger. They know that this class is stronger than the other classes and has more options than the other classes. And they have already said and intimated that Havoc is not a fully fleshed out system, that it's going to continue to grow and expand. So if Havoc 40 to 60 it comes with a later update this year or something like that, I would not be at all surprised. But what it comes down to is that increase in difficulty cannot just be more enemies, because Rumblers, as we addressed previously, have the more enemies problem solved. Classes that have huge AoE capabilities like Psychers or like Chorus that can suppress like a whole room, they have that more enemies problem solved. It all plays the same to them. What we need is more complex enemies. We need greater challenges within the set of enemies that we have, and new enemies. And I think that would ultimately be a great solution. It would allow everything to exist in one place. So in summary, over here on the weapon side of things, very, very high performing weapons, which are extremely few. It's like the Rumbler and perhaps the Flame Staff. These need to be brought down. They just fundamentally can't coexist with other weapons in a gameplay space and have everything be balanced. Then weapons that are pretty low down should be brought up a lot. I don't feel bad about saying that Shredder Auto Pistol and Vigilant Auto Guns should be brought up a considerable amount and should be very, very powerful in their own right, maybe just in a different way. It won't, remember, you can only use one weapon at a time, so players who are already using Plasma, this isn't going to be a buff to them. And this isn't going to be a buff to players who are using Recon Lasgun. It's only a buff to players who are trying to use, these off-meta weapons. So these things should be brought up a lot. Yes, what that will ultimately do to player power distribution is it will skew it upwards like this. But what needs to happen on this front, on the difficulty front, is that Havoc needs to have new and intense challenges added to it to further engage the players who are now enjoying Havoc for the first time, and especially the players who are pushing that upper limit of current Havoc. More Havoc levels should probably be added, and especially there should be some upper tier threats that only exist for those very, very top level players. Havoc 40 to 50 could be made very, very insanely difficult, and these players up here, maybe not me so much, but these players up here would have a great time with it, bashing their heads against this seemingly insurmountable task. And at the end of the day, there is one final factor that makes me certain that the buffing most things strategy is the way to go forward for Darktide. It is the player count. Buffing things has improved this game, has made there be more diversity because so many things are low performing, and it has made the game more accessible, where Darktide is a very, very difficult game. But I don't think it needs to be as difficult as it is to engage with at low levels. I believe that Ogryn and Arbites being as strong as they are allows many more players who would ultimately have bounced off of this game with playing Psyker or Veteran to engage in the game and stick with it. And we have seen that having powerful new things in the game has drawn players to the game. It's made them excited. We've seen very, very, very positive feedback from the player base about how strong and interesting and good Arbites is and all of his weapons are, and the same thing happened with Ogryn. Players like these changes, and that at the end of the day is the single most important thing for Darktide, is do people want to play it? Is it fun? Is it engaging? And I think that the fun that is to be had is increased tremendously by this buff most things strategy, and so that's what I want to advocate for going forward. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Am I completely off my fucking rocker? I don't think I am. You probably won't be able to convince me anyway, but I really do appreciate you guys watching another great Yaptide video, and I'll see you very soon for some more tier lists. Thanks for watching, guys.